What happens when a quiet studio built for polite conversation suddenly becomes a pressure chamber, when smiles freeze and the air tightens, and a young star known for grace decides she will not bend. The lights of the view glow warm and forgiving, but beneath them something sharp is forming. Something no one in the audience expected when Zendaya walked out in soft colors and calm confidence. Before we go any further, subscribe to the Narration Show right now, like this video, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, because stories like this only get more intense as they unfold. Zendaya settles into her chair with the ease of someone used to cameras, but tonight her posture is alert, shoulders straight, eyes observant, reading the room. The audience applauds, a familiar wave of admiration rolling toward her, and for a moment it feels like any other daytime interview. Whoopi Goldberg leans back slightly, hands folded, her presence commanding without effort. She has steered countless conversations through storms, and the audience trusts her to guide this one safely too. The opening questions are light, almost playful, touching on projects, growth, the strange weight of fame that arrived early and never really left. Zendaya answers with warmth, choosing her words carefully, smiling when appropriate, nodding with respect. Yet beneath the calm cadence, something flickers. A comment lands from the panel, framed as curiosity but edged with assumption, about responsibility, about speaking out, about how young stars should navigate opinions in public. The camera cuts to Zendaya's face, and the smile pauses for half a second too long. It's subtle, but the audience senses it, that microscopic shift when someone decides whether to let something slide or stand their ground. Whoopi follows up, voice steady, authoritative, seasoned by decades of conversation and confrontation. She speaks about perspective, about experience, about having seen cycles repeat, implying that patience and restraint matter more than immediate reaction. The words aren't harsh, but they carry weight, and as they hang in the air, a murmur ripples through the crowd. Zendaya inhales, slow and deliberate, as if measuring the room, the stakes, the moment that will define the next 10 minutes. She responds softly at first, acknowledging respect for those who came before her, for lessons learned the hard way. Her tone is calm, almost gentle, and some in the audience relax, assuming the moment will dissolve into agreement. But then her voice firms, not louder, just clearer. She talks about lived experience, about how being young doesn't mean being unaware, how silence can sometimes feel like complicity. The studio grows quieter, applause hesitant, scattered, unsure which side to land on. Whoopi's eyebrows lift slightly, a sign recognized by longtime viewers. She leans forward now, elbows closer to the table, eyes locked on Zendaya. She counters with history, with the importance of timing, with the idea that not every battle must be fought on camera. The exchange remains polite, but tension hums beneath every syllable. The audience feels it in their chests, that tightening sensation when respect and disagreement collide. Zendaya listens without interrupting, nodding, but her jaw sets. When she speaks again, there is steel beneath the silk. She explains that visibility comes with obligation, that choosing when to speak is a privilege not everyone has. Her words are measured, but they land hard, and a collective gasp slips from the audience before anyone can stop it. The camera catches hands flying to mouths, eyes widening, the realization dawning that this is no longer a routine segment. Whoopi responds quickly, asserting that wisdom is earned over time, that survival in the public eye requires strategy. Her voice carries authority, but there's an edge now, a defensive note that wasn't there before. The two women lock eyes, generations apart yet sharing the same space, the same spotlight. Neither raises her voice, but the silence between sentences grows heavier, more charged. Zendaya's heart is racing, though her face remains composed. She speaks of responsibility not as a burden, but as a choice, one she refuses to shy away from. She challenges the notion that youth equals recklessness, pointing out that history often moves because someone decided not to wait their turn. Applause breaks out, louder this time, uneven but undeniable, and the energy in the room shifts again. Whoopi exhales, a slow breath audible through her microphone. She acknowledges Zendaya's passion, but cautions against oversimplifying complex struggles. Her words are careful, but the exchange has already crossed an invisible line. The audience senses it, the point of no return where both women have revealed something personal, something deeply held. Zendaya nods once, then adds quietly that complexity should never be an excuse for silence. The line hangs in the air, sharp and undeniable. Another gasp, followed by applause that swells despite attempts to move on. The moderator's instinct to steer the conversation elsewhere falters, because the moment has taken on a life of its own. Cameras cut to the crowd, faces animated, whispering, reacting in real time. Social media producers backstage are already typing, clips being marked, hashtags forming before the segment even ends. On stage, Zendaya sits back slightly now, having said what she came to say, hands resting calmly in her lap. Whoopi studies her, expression unreadable, the weight of the exchange settling in. The segment eventually shifts, but the tension lingers like static. Polite smiles return, yet they don't quite reach the eyes. As the applause signals the end of the interview, the audience stands, buzzing, aware they've witnessed something raw and unscripted. Zendaya thanks the hosts, her voice steady, and Whoopi nods, offering a gracious closing remark that feels more like a pause than an ending. Backstage, the air is thick with adrenaline. Producers exchange glances, knowing this conversation will echo far beyond the studio walls. Zendaya walks down the corridor, expression thoughtful, replaying every word, every pause. Whoopi remains seated for a moment longer, gathering herself, a veteran recognizing that even after decades, moments like this can still surprise. As the lights dim and the next segment begins, the audience continues to murmur, phones glowing as clips spread online. This was only the beginning, the spark before the wildfire, a moment when respect met resistance and neither backed down. And as viewers at home lean closer to their screens, one thing becomes clear: this conversation is far from over. The moment the cameras cut away, the tension doesn't dissolve, it multiplies. The applause fades into a restless buzz, and the studio feels smaller now, like the walls have leaned in to listen. Zendaya sits perfectly still, hands folded, breathing evenly, but inside her chest her heart is still racing, replaying every word, every pause, every glance. She knows exactly what she did. She knows exactly why she did it. Across the table, Whoopi Goldberg adjusts her glasses, her expression calm on the surface, seasoned professionalism holding firm. Yet behind her eyes something is working, evaluating, recalibrating. The producers signal for a short break, but the energy refuses to reset. Audience members whisper to one another, some nodding in approval, others frowning, everyone aware they've crossed from daytime television into something raw and unscripted. Zendaya feels eyes on her from every direction, curiosity mixed with admiration and also doubt. She straightens slightly, not out of nerves, but resolve. She will not shrink now. When the cameras come back on, the lighting feels harsher, brighter, as if the truth itself demands clarity. Whoopi clears her throat, her voice warm but deliberate as she steers the conversation back, acknowledging that strong opinions can coexist with respect. It sounds like a bridge, an olive branch offered to stabilize the moment. The audience exhales collectively, grateful for familiar ground. Zendaya listens closely, nodding once, appreciative but unconvinced that the core issue has been addressed. She responds with care, choosing language that balances firmness with grace. She speaks about dialogue, about discomfort being necessary for growth, about how silence often protects the powerful more than the vulnerable. Her tone is steady, but the message cuts deep. A ripple moves through the audience again, softer than before, but charged. Some clap instinctively, others hesitate, unsure whether applause will escalate the tension further. Whoopi leans forward, resting her forearms on the table, signaling engagement rather than retreat. She talks about survival, about battles fought quietly behind closed doors, about the cost of visibility that young voices sometimes underestimate. There's no condescension in her voice, but there is warning, experience wrapped in concern. For a split second, Zendaya feels the weight of that history, the truth in it, the scars that come from decades in the spotlight. But then she speaks again, and this time her words are personal. She talks about being watched since childhood, about learning early that composure is expected even when the world feels unjust. She admits fear, not of backlash, but of regret, of looking back and realizing she stayed silent when her voice could have mattered. The studio grows quiet enough that every breath is audible. Even Whoopi stills, listening. The audience reacts in waves, murmurs swelling, a few audible gasps slipping through. This is no longer an abstract debate, it's lived experience colliding in real time. Whoopi nods slowly, acknowledging the vulnerability, but counters with a reminder that movements are marathons, not sprints, that longevity requires restraint as much as courage. Her words carry the weight of someone who has seen passion burn bright and burn out. Zendaya meets her gaze, unflinching. She agrees that longevity matters, but insists that momentum is built in moments like these, moments that feel uncomfortable but necessary. She says change doesn't always wait for perfect timing. Another gasp, sharper this time, followed by applause that breaks through despite attempts to maintain decorum. The moderators exchange quick glances, realizing the segment has taken on a life of its own again. Cameras cut briefly to the audience, faces animated, emotions split across generational lines. Younger viewers lean forward, energized, while older ones look thoughtful, conflicted, recognizing both sides of the argument. On stage, Whoopi exhales slowly, a measured breath that speaks of patience rather than surrender. She responds with calm authority, emphasizing unity over division, warning against framing differences as opposition. Zendaya softens slightly, clarifying that disagreement doesn't equal disrespect. She speaks of honoring those who paved the way while still carving new paths forward. Her words are inclusive, bridging rather than burning, and the shift is palpable. The tension doesn't disappear, but it evolves, less confrontational, more reflective. Applause rises again, steadier now, more unified. Yet beneath the calmer tone, the stakes remain high. Social media teams backstage are already monitoring reactions, clips spreading, opinions forming at lightning speed. Zendaya senses it even without seeing a screen, the way moments like this ripple outward, magnified and distorted beyond the room. She wonders briefly how her words will be cut, captioned, debated, but pushes the thought aside. What's said is said. Whoopi offers a small smile, genuine this time, acknowledging the courage it takes to speak with conviction on such a public stage. She reminds the audience that progress has always come from dialogue across generations, not from one voice alone. The statement feels like closure, or at least an attempt at it. Zendaya nods, appreciative, but the fire in her eyes hasn't dimmed. As the segment winds down, the applause feels different than before, heavier, more contemplative. The audience senses they've witnessed something layered, not a simple clash, but a meeting of perspectives shaped by time, experience, and urgency. Zendaya thanks the hosts again, her voice warm, respectful, and Whoopi responds in kind, professionalism reasserting itself. But when the cameras finally cut for good, the silence that follows is thick. Zendaya stands, smoothing her jacket, exchanging brief words with the panel, polite and measured. Whoopi watches her go, thoughtful, perhaps reminded that even seasoned voices must make room for new ones. Backstage, producers scramble, already planning how this moment will be framed, teased, replayed. Zendaya walks down the hallway, the hum of the studio fading behind her. Her phone vibrates incessantly in her pocket, notifications piling up, but she doesn't check it yet. She knows the conversation has already escaped the room, evolving into something bigger, something uncontrollable. She pauses for a moment, leaning against the wall, exhaling deeply. Out in the studio, audience members file out buzzing, recounting the exchange to anyone who will listen. Some defend Whoopi's caution, others praise Zendaya's courage, and many admit they see themselves somewhere in between. The debate has begun, and it won't end tonight. As the lights dim and the set resets for the next show, one truth lingers in the air, undeniable and unresolved. This was not a misunderstanding, not a fleeting soundbite. It was a collision of eras, values, and urgency captured live, unfiltered. And as the first headlines begin to form, the world leans in, waiting to see what comes next. By the time the studio doors close behind Zendaya, the moment has already begun to mutate. It no longer belongs solely to the people who witnessed it live. It's traveling, fragmenting into clips, captions, reactions, each one sharpening a different edge of the exchange. Backstage feels strangely quiet compared to the storm forming outside, a calm corridor before impact. Zendaya moves with purpose, greeting staff with polite nods, gratitude steady in her voice, but inside her thoughts are loud, overlapping, relentless. She finally checks her phone. The screen lights up like a warning flare. Messages from friends, from her team, from numbers she doesn't recognize. Some are supportive, proud, emotional. Others are cautious, urging restraint, reminding her how quickly narratives harden online. She scrolls once, twice, then locks the screen again. Not yet. She needs space to breathe before the world decides who she was in that moment. Inside the studio, Whoopi remains seated longer than usual, listening as producers chatter around her. She's seen moments explode before, careers reshaped by a single exchange, and she understands the machinery already in motion. A producer approaches carefully, mentioning that the segment is trending within minutes. Whoopi nods, unsurprised, her expression thoughtful rather than alarmed. She knows what she said, why she said it, and she knows Zendaya does too. The first clips hit social media almost immediately. Short, sharp edits. Zendaya's calm but firm delivery. Whoopi's measured rebuttals. The gasps from the audience amplified, replayed, slowed down, dramatized. Captions frame the moment as confrontation, as generational clash, as defiance. Comment sections ignite, filling with arguments that grow more polarized by the second. Some praise Zendaya as fearless, a voice for now. Others defend Whoopi's wisdom, her caution forged by decades of survival. Zendaya reaches her car, the door closing with a muted thud that briefly shuts the world out. She leans back, eyes closing, replaying the exchange in her mind not as clips, but as a lived moment. She remembers Whoopi's eyes, the pause before certain words, the weight behind them. This was never about winning. It was about honesty, about refusing to dilute truth for comfort. Her phone buzzes again. A message from a younger fan stands out, heartfelt, shaky, thanking her for saying what they've been afraid to say. Zendaya exhales slowly. This is why. Not for applause, not for headlines, but for moments like that, quiet affirmations that courage can echo. Across town, Whoopi sits in her dressing room, the glow of a tablet reflecting off her glasses. She watches a clip once, then turns it off. She doesn't need to relive it frame by frame. What matters isn't how it's edited, but what it stirred. She's aware that some will frame her as dismissive, others as protective. She's worn both labels before. She's learned that intention and perception rarely align perfectly. A producer knocks, asking if she'd like to make a statement. Whoopi considers it, then shakes her head. Not yet. Sometimes the loudest response is patience. She knows the cycle well, the initial outrage, the think pieces, the reassessments that follow once emotion cools. She trusts time more than immediacy. By evening, headlines multiply. Zendaya pushes back on live TV. A tense exchange stuns the audience. Generations collide on the view. Each outlet adds its own slant, its own emphasis. Commentators dissect body language, tone, pauses, turning human interaction into evidence. Zendaya's team fields calls non-stop, weighing options, crafting responses that won't inflame or diminish the moment. Zendaya sits at home now, shoes kicked off, still in her clothes from the show. The room is quiet except for the distant hum of the city. She opens her laptop, not to read reactions, but to write. Not a statement, not yet, just thoughts, raw and unfiltered. She writes about responsibility, about fear, about respect that doesn't require silence. The words flow easily, honestly. Whether anyone else ever sees them doesn't matter right now. Meanwhile, talk shows and podcasts begin to weigh in. Some hosts praise the exchange as healthy discourse, others frame it as unnecessary tension. Clips are paused mid-sentence, analyzed like courtroom footage. The audience's gasp becomes a character of its own, a symbol of shock, of boundaries crossed. The narrative hardens in some spaces, softens in others. Whoopi watches a late-night recap, arms crossed, listening as a panel debates her intent. She smiles faintly at one point, shaking her head. They weren't there. They didn't feel the room, the subtle shifts, the shared respect beneath disagreement. She turns off the TV before the segment ends, choosing rest over reaction. Zendaya's name trends through the night. Support pours in from fellow artists, activists, peers who recognize the courage it takes to speak calmly in a space that rewards spectacle. There are criticisms too, sharp and unforgiving, accusing her of naivety, of overstepping. She reads some, ignores most. She knows better than to mistake volume for truth. The next morning, the conversation evolves. Longer clips surface, showing context, nuance, the moments of mutual acknowledgement often cut from shorter edits. Some opinions soften. Others double down. Zendaya's team suggests a brief response, something that affirms respect while standing by her words. She agrees, but only if it's authentic, not sanitized. She drafts a message slowly, deliberately. She acknowledges Whoopi's legacy, her respect for those who came before, and reiterates that dialogue, even uncomfortable dialogue, is essential. The post goes live quietly, without fanfare. Within minutes, it spreads, reshared with commentary that ranges from praise to skepticism. Whoopi reads it later that day. She pauses, then nods, a small smile forming. She appreciates the tone, the balance. She considers responding publicly, then decides against it. Some conversations don't need the last word to be meaningful. The audience reaction continues to ripple outward. College classrooms discuss the exchange as an example of generational discourse. Editorials frame it as a microcosm of broader cultural tension. Fans debate respectfully in some corners, viciously in others. The moment has transcended entertainment, becoming a reference point, a shorthand for a larger conversation. Zendaya feels the weight of it, but also a strange calm. She did not raise her voice. She did not attack. She spoke her truth and listened in return. Whatever people decide about it is beyond her control. She meets with her team, discussing upcoming projects, commitments unchanged. Life moves forward, even when moments linger. Whoopi, too, moves on, hosting the next episode with her usual presence, professionalism intact. Viewers watch closely, searching for signs of fallout, tension, regret. They find none. Just a woman doing her job, as she always has, carrying the experience quietly. Yet beneath the surface, something has shifted. The exchange has opened space, made visible the push and pull between caution and urgency, experience and immediacy. It has reminded audiences that respect doesn't erase disagreement, and disagreement doesn't negate respect. As days pass, the noise begins to thin, but the impact remains. Zendaya receives another message, this one from someone older, thanking her for listening as well as speaking. She smiles, realizing that perhaps the moment did exactly what it needed to do. It didn't resolve anything neatly. It complicated things, and in doing so, made them more honest. The world will keep debating, reframing, moving on to the next flashpoint. But for those who watched closely, who felt the tension rather than just consuming it, the exchange lingers as something rare. A live moment where two powerful voices stood firm without tearing each other down. And somewhere between the headlines and the hashtags, between applause and critique, the real story continues quietly, not as a clash, but as a conversation still unfolding, waiting for its next chapter. The days that follow do not calm the storm, they define it. What began as a live exchange on a brightly lit stage has now settled into the bloodstream of culture, pulsing through timelines, opinion columns, late-night monologues, and private conversations whispered between friends. The moment has crystallized, no longer just Zendaya and Whoopi at a table, but a symbol larger than either of them. And symbols have consequences. By the end of the week, the audience reaction has split into something deeper than outrage or praise. It has become introspective. Viewers who gasped in the studio replay that sound in their minds, realizing now that it wasn't shock alone, it was recognition. The gasp marked the instant when something unsaid finally surfaced, when politeness cracked just enough to let truth breathe. People begin to talk about that sound as much as the words themselves, calling it the moment the room realized history was happening in real time. Zendaya steps out in public again for the first time since the show, cameras flashing, microphones reaching. She moves calmly, composed, offering no dramatic sound bites, no defensive speeches. Her silence now is not retreat, it is intentional. She understands something many don't learn until much later, that moments grow stronger when you don't over-explain them. Her presence alone becomes the statement. Fans cheer, some with tears in their eyes, others simply nodding with quiet respect. Inside, she feels changed, not shaken. The exchange did not harden her, it clarified her. She knows now, without question, that her voice carries weight not because it is loud, but because it is deliberate. She reflects on Whoopi often, not with resentment, but with appreciation for the tension that forced clarity. Disagreement did not weaken her resolve, it sharpened it. Whoopi, for her part, addresses the moment days later, not in defense, not in apology, but in reflection. On air, she speaks calmly, reminding viewers that dialogue across generations has always been uncomfortable and always necessary. She praises young voices for their courage while reaffirming the lessons of endurance. There is no bitterness in her tone, only gravity. The audience applauds, not wildly, but deeply, as if they understand that this is not closure, but continuation. Media outlets shift their framing. Early headlines soften. Longer features emerge, contextualizing the exchange instead of sensationalizing it. Commentators acknowledge the mutual respect that existed beneath the friction. Some even admit they were wrong in their first reactions. The conversation matures, just slightly, just enough to feel meaningful. Social media, too, evolves. The loudest outrage fades, replaced by thoughtful threads, video essays, classroom discussions. Teachers use the clip to talk about communication. Parents use it to talk to their children about speaking up without tearing others down. Young viewers feel seen. Older viewers feel challenged. And somewhere in that tension, growth happens. Zendaya reads a letter sent by a young woman who writes that she finally spoke up at work after watching the exchange. Another message comes from a man who says he understood his daughter better after hearing Zendaya articulate urgency without disrespect. These are not viral moments. They are quieter, heavier, and they matter more. Whoopi receives messages too, from people thanking her for reminding them that battles are long, that survival requires strategy. She smiles at those, knowing that wisdom does not expire just because the world moves faster now. She feels no need to compete with Zendaya's moment. There is room for both truths, and she knows it. When footage of the episode airs again in reruns, viewers watch differently. They notice the pauses, the restraint, the moments of listening often ignored the first time. The clash no longer feels explosive, it feels intentional. The audience gasp now sounds less like shock and more like awakening. And slowly, inevitably, the media machine moves on. Another headline replaces it. Another controversy demands attention. But this moment doesn't vanish. It settles. It becomes a reference point, something people return to when conversations about voice, age, responsibility, and respect resurface. Zendaya continues her work, her projects unchanged, her demeanor steady. She doesn't brand the moment, doesn't capitalize on it, doesn't dramatize it. That restraint speaks louder than any follow-up speech could. She knows the power of letting a moment stand on its own. Whoopi continues hosting, guiding conversations with the same authority she always has. Viewers watch her with renewed awareness, seeing not just a host, but a living archive of struggle, resilience, and earned caution. Her presence reminds people that progress did not start yesterday. The audience, both in the studio and at home, becomes the true aftermath. They carry the exchange with them into their own lives, into arguments handled differently, into moments where listening replaces interruption. Not always, not perfectly, but sometimes, enough to matter. And that is where the real power of this moment lives. Not in who won, not in who spoke last, but in the fact that millions witnessed two strong women disagree without cruelty, stand firm without destruction, and leave the space intact. In a world addicted to chaos, that restraint felt radical. Now it's your turn. What did you feel in that moment when the audience gasped? Did Zendaya's urgency resonate with you? Or did Whoopi's caution speak louder? Or did you find yourself somewhere in between, recognizing truth on both sides? Share your honest thoughts in the comments, because conversations like this only grow when more voices are added. And if you want more cinematic, intense, emotionally charged stories that take you inside moments the world couldn't stop watching, make sure you subscribe to the Narration Show right now. Like this video, share it with someone who loves powerful storytelling, and stay with us, because the next story might be even more explosive than this one.